Welcome to What is Going for new thought from the edge of Each week on OMTimes flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandy Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Here is your host, Sandy Sedgbeer.
Hello. It's a simple idea, albeit not an easy one, to inspire people to live in a manner that is beneficial to Earth, our communities, and ourselves. But Rob Greenfield gave up doing easy when at the age of 24 he started paying attention to the environmental and social issues of his generation and discovered that he was contributing to many of these problems himself through the food he was eating, the car he was driving, and the stuff he was buying and consuming. At which point he began his transformation from a drunk dude to a dude who's dedicating his life to making a difference. From cycling across the USA on a bamboo bicycle for sustainability, to foraging in grocery store dumpsters, to travelling across the USA without credit cards or cash, Rob Greenfield's extreme adventures, activism campaigns, TEDx talks, and TV series bringing awareness to important environmental issues have not only caught the attention of the world's media, but also inspired positive changes in countless people over the last 6 years to be the change we all wish to see in the world. Rob Greenfield, welcome.
Hello, very nice to be on with you. Thank you.
Rob, your extreme adventures and your in-your-face activism campaigns have been featured on numerous media outlets, including the BBC, CBS, Discovery Channel, US Today, Huffington Post, The Guardian, and the LA Times. Did you have any idea when you set out on that first trip across America that you were riding into a whole new life as an environmental activist and humanitarian?
Yeah, actually, that was completely my intentions. At that point in 2013, well, the thing is, what happened was I had been making changes in my life for 2 years at that point. I really started to feel like I was becoming an example of what I wanted to see in the world. I felt like I was, becoming the change I wanted to see. And so that's when I decided that I really wanted to start to live it out loud, like lead by example and live it out loud. And so my plan was to really shake things up and try to get media to talk more about environmental issues and get more people to make positive changes. So yeah, that was the plan.
So what rules did you determine to live by throughout that journey?
Well, on that bike trip, the idea was to cross the country, trying to have as little of environmental impact as I possibly could. And the idea was to do it in a way that I would be bettering myself while doing something that was kind of an interesting story for others to follow. On that trip, I focused on all the basic aspects of sustainable living. That's food, water, energy, waste, and transportation, all the things that we deal with on a daily basis, whether we think about it or realize it or not.
So how difficult a journey was it?
Well, it was a very difficult journey. That was biking on a bamboo bike from San Francisco to Vermont, 4,700 miles, and trying to pay attention to every action that I made. Biking across the country in itself is hard, but doing it while trying to create zero trash, use less water than for the entire trip than the average American uses in a couple of days. To try to eat only local, organic, unpackaged food, to try to use no electricity from on the grid. I had all these rules to kind of bike off the grid across the United States with as little impact as possible. And every day was a challenge for sure.
I was reading your book and you say how there were so many people who were so supportive along the way, but some people wanted to help you in ways that you didn't want to be helped. They wanted to cook meals for you, but that was actually counter to, the way you wanted to live your life and have your meals cooked en route.
Well, yeah. So for this summer, I was doing a very set thing. It was I had set these rules to follow for the summer. And they were kind of extreme rules to really prove a point and to get people to really step outside their box with me for at least a moment and start thinking about these things. And so for the summer, yeah, I mean, the only food I could eat was local, organic, unpackaged food, which meant, pretty much nobody could cook for me because I had a very, set thing going on. And I couldn't use electricity, so that means they couldn't use their stove or anything like that. So yeah, when I was, staying with people, setting up my tent in their backyard, for example, as I was crossing the country, and they really wanted to provide so much hospitality, it was a challenge because I often had to say, well, no, I'd love to have your homemade cookies, but I just can't.
Where did you get your determination to resist temptation from?
Well, I guess I do feel like one of the most important characteristics is to have self-control. If we're talking about, changing ourselves environmentally or our mental consciousness, we're in a world where you're being bombarded every day by 1,000 times more consumeristic messages than you are health conscious messages. If you turn on the TV, if you turn on the internet, if you walk down the street, generally you're being told, buy this, purchase that, you need this, and not things like just eat healthy food, just breathe fresh air, just be happy. So you need a big thing is you need self-control in order to be able to live a conscious and ethical lifestyle. And so I've actually always practiced self-control and that trip did play a role in that, just because it's something that we got to have.
One of the things that's so shocking in your book is the amount of waste. I mean, the number of dumpsters you dived into and the plethora of foods, many of which were still within their sell-by date, that you were able to plunder there. Were you aware of the scale of waste before you started on that journey?
No, I definitely wasn't aware at all. So the deal was, as I had said, I could only eat local, organic, unpackaged food, but the exception was that I could eat any food that was going to waste, which meant dumpster diving. And I had never been dumpster diving before. And on this trip, I basically was, I was forced to, because I couldn't find local, organic, unpackaged food in most parts of the country. We have this term food desert, which is an area where there's no access to healthy food. And so that resulted in me having this exception, and that was that I could eat food that was going to waste. So I started to look inside dumpsters, and I was just instantly blown away. I mean, the first dumpster I ever looked in was full of food. And then across the nation, I just continuously would check the dumpsters, and I found that dumpster after dumpster after dumpster, and we're talking about grocery store dumpsters, are filled often to the brim with perfectly good food. And I was blown away. At first, it wasn't something I talked about because of the whole ego aspect. But after a while, it was just like, man, I got to put my ego behind me. We're talking about half of all the food in the United States is wasted. It's a huge environmental problem, but it's a huge human problem. 1 in 7 Americans are food insecure. So we have enough food to feed the entire country, yet people are hungry. So I had to put my ego aside and start showing what I'm seeing to really raise awareness about food waste.
And you certainly invented some very interesting ways of showing people what you were seeing. You're listening to What Is Going On. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, and I'm speaking with environmental activist Rob Greenfield about his book, Dude, Making a Difference, which is inspiring people around the world to re-examine the way they live, the amount of waste they create, and their relationship with the Earth's resources. We'll hear more about that shocking waste and many other things that we need to change after the break.
The future of Internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Change and growth are part of natural life and also part of your spiritual life. Everyone needs support and guidance, especially during life passages. Upgrade yourself with the OMTimes Experts program. With OMTimes Experts, you have access to the best intuitive coaches, spiritual teachers, counselors, astrologists, and oracles. Our team was carefully selected so you can trust. Find out more at experts.omtimes.com.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
My name is Meera Batra, and this is How I Live United. Many families have come to America for a better life. I advocate for these families with United Way. United Way empowers them to see opportunities available. We help them get involved with their kids' schools and network within the community. My name is Meera Batra. I help families see opportunity and succeed. I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer, Live United. Go to liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
Welcome back. Rob Greenfield, to put this, the scale of waste into context, you say that we throw away $165 billion worth of food a year in the USA, which is more than the budgets for the US national parks, public libraries, federal prisons, veterans health care, the FBI, and the FDA combined. And we're not just wasteful with food. In fact, you say that basically everything we need can be found in the trash. Can you expand a bit on that?
Yeah, well, it is really hard to wrap our heads around, because the thing is, most waste is out of sight, out of mind. It goes into the garbage can or it goes into the dumpster, and then the garbage truck comes and picks it up, and then it's in a container that you can't see through, and then it goes to a landfill that is usually in a place where we never see. It's out of sight again. And so the whole entire process is something that's very much behind the scenes. And so because of that, it's totally out of mind. We never really have to think about it. It's been done in a way that's really just largely invisible to us. Now, I think that that's something that's not going to be able to continue forever. That's sort of one of the delusions we have today that's going to really catch up to us. But anyway, because of that, this is able to continue for the time being. And so we don't see how, literally in the United States, there's a population of about 320 million Americans, but we waste enough food to feed another entire America. What that means is we produce enough food to feed about 600 million Americans. And because of the system that we've created of disposing of it, it's just not something that really crosses our radar. Food waste is actually one of the biggest environmental issues of our time, because when you waste food, you also waste all of the water that used to produce that food, all of the land that the food was grown on, all of the work hours, all of the pesticides and the herbicides and the fungicides, the people working at, for $5 an hour spraying those pesticides that have higher rates of cancer, half of that's for nothing. So that's, what's happening when we're wasting food.
Seems we've been having some technical problems this morning. I'm really sorry about that. I missed the last piece that you said, Rob, but I really want to talk about, expand on this trash, because it is such a huge, huge problem. Throughout Europe, many big supermarkets are now changing the way that they deal with food that is approaching or past its sell-by date, and have, all kinds of initiatives in place to address that issue. But you did a wonderful campaign to draw attention to this, which was 30 Days of Trash. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I like to come up with very visual ways to catch people's attention and get them to think about important issues. And so, as far as our individual waste that we create, again, it's out of sight, out of mind. We put it in the trash can and the garbage man comes and picks it up, and we never really see how much it adds up to. So I thought, how can I create a visual that will really help people to like see how much trash we create and wrap their heads around it? And so I thought, what better way than living like the average person, just like, you know, the average person eating, shopping, consuming like the average person does, but with the catch that I had to wear every piece of trash that I created. That way I wouldn't be yelling at anybody. I would just, and, you know, it would be out there kind of in people's faces but I wouldn't be telling anybody they had to listen. I was just doing it. And if they wanted to ask what it was that I was doing, they could. But anyway, that whole idea was just to create that visual, and it definitely worked. You know, at the end of the month, I was wearing 87 pounds of trash, which is quite the sight.
Yeah, and quite a lot to be carrying around. I mean, you know, any woman would shriek in horror if she thought that she was carrying an extra 80 plus pounds on her body. But when we think what we're doing with that 80 plus pounds that we all throw away every month, I mean, the thought is just really horrific.
Yeah, it very much is.
But that certainly got a lot of attention. I mean, I think you had media coverage in France and all over the world for that one. How do you come up with the ideas?
Well, a lot of times it's while I'm riding my bike. I find myself a lot of times the most inspired while I'm out on a long ride, and it's just brainstorming. It's just, you know, constant brainstorming. I brainstorm with my girlfriend Cheryl quite a bit, and just whoever I'm hanging out with. I kind of am someone who likes to be productive pretty much all the time, and so a lot of times if I'm just hanging out with friends, I'm talking about ideas and running ideas past them. And then the other thing is that I do look at things that have been successful and see how I can bend them into an environmental issue. So for example, Trash Me, where I wore all my trash for a month, came from Super Size Me, where Morgan Spurlock ate only McDonald's for 30 days to bring attention to, you know, the fast food industry. And so I thought, you know, that was extremely successful. How can I use this like idea and switch it over to, you know, raising awareness about trash? And so he ate only McDonald's for a month, and I lived like the average American and wore all my trash. So Super Size Me, Trash Me. That was one of the big inspirations.
So for that entire month, were you going against every rule that you made on that bike trip and eating normally, consuming electricity, water, you know, power, everything? Or were you just picking up trash and carrying it?
No. So, you know, that was the thing about this, is that for the whole month, I was the opposite of me, really. Like, my thing is paying attention to every action and trying to create as little trash as possible. And instead, for the month, what I did is I just lived like the average American. So I went to the grocery store and I looked to see what was in other people's shopping carts, and that's what I bought. I would go to the restaurant and I'd say, what does everybody order? And that's what I'd get. So, you know, I hadn't eaten at McDonald's for 5 years since, you know, back in the day when I wasn't very conscious. I ate fast food. So I hadn't done it in 5 years. And so, you know, day 3, I went to McDonald's. I said, what do people get? And they said a Big Mac is the most common thing. So I ate a Big Mac. It was the first time I've had that in, again, 5 years. And so it was a very immersive and interesting experience to basically just float along in the breeze of American consumerism for a month.
That must have been really excruciating.
Excruciating, but I fully embraced it. I knew what I was getting into when I decided to do it. So, you know, I actually made it as fun as I possibly could, because I just try to think logically, and it's like, well, is excruciating going to make this better or not? And the answer is no. This is the experience that I have, so I just have to embrace it.
So now you didn't just do this with trash. I mean, you decided in 2014, you know, to go moneyless And so you did another trip across the USA without any money, and you travelled abroad without any money. Tell us a little bit about how you did that, because most people would think that's impossible.
Well, so this was, yes, I flew to, I'm just trying to think, it was 2014 in the spring, and one of the things is that, our society is so dependent upon money, and we think that, there's a saying, money makes the world go round. And, it's just something that I don't believe is reality. I think that it's possible to live very, very good lives where money is either not a part of your life or it's a small part of your life. And so, to create something that would really get people thinking, my thing was that I landed in Panama with no money, with just the clothes in my back and my passport. And I had to make it all the way back to San Diego. So I had to pass through 7 countries, through Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, Mexico. And really, I was 2 things. One, dependent on the kindness of others. And really, I wanted to show that there's so many good people out there, contrary to what the news will say, that it's this dangerous, bloody place. And then secondly, it required me to be resourceful. And I think that's one of the most important characteristics that we can work on, is being resourceful. Because the thing is, if you're not resourceful, then you got to be a consumer, because you need to buy everything to solve your problems. You need to throw money at every situation, and you're stuck in the money trap. But once you become resourceful and you realize that Earth provides us with what we need, if we only know how to use the resources wisely, then you're able to really step outside of that trap. And so by traveling with no money, again, I was dependent upon the kindness of others, but also dependent upon my resourcefulness to get me home.
You're listening to What is Going On. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, and my guest is extreme adventurer, environmental activist, and humanitarian Rob Greenfield, who lives a near zero waste lifestyle with just 111 possessions to his name, and donates 100% of his media income to grassroots environmental non-profits. We'll be back with more after the break.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
I'm Fidel Nsombo. I was born in a city called the Bukavu in the Congo. We were a loving family, and then, boom, everything that I had disappeared in a single day. People think that when you are a refugee and they resettle you to America, and all your problems are done. They don't understand that that's the beginning of everything. I was not born a refugee. I was made one.
It's time we welcome refugee families with open arms. Learn more at embracerefugees.org, brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back. Rob Greenfield, you lived off the grid in a 50-square-foot tiny home in San Diego, California. What did that actually entail for you? What did you have to do to be completely off the grid?
Well, basically, a lot of people, I think there's a lot of confusion about what the word off the grid means, because, really what off the grid means is it means you're off of the municipal public utilities, which is basically electricity and water. So a lot of people, when they hear off the grid, they think that means everything. It means you don't have a Facebook account or, a computer, or that you're some somewhat non-existent citizen. But off the grid, it just means that you have your own supply of energy and water, and that you're not using the literal grid, because that's what it is. Above and below us, the power lines are a grid, and the water is a grid. They're arranged in grid. So for water, I harvested all my water from the sky, from rainwater. That's rainwater harvesting. And then for electricity, I had small solar panels. But I really did take it many steps further than living off the grid. The idea was to really have as little environmental impact as possible while living in the city. So I simplified my life down to not having a single bill to my name, not having a single debt, not having any credit cards. That's still the same, and it's been 3 years now, although I don't live at a tiny house now. I'm traveling. But so that was living in the tiny house. It was a really a great experience of simple living in the city.
And not much bigger than what most people would use as a garden shed. And you had all your possessions. You harnessed energy from the sun. You created near zero waste, and you composted your own human manure, as it's called. But then after a year of that, you auctioned off your little house and raised enough money to build 10 tiny houses for homeless San Diegans. How was that project going?
Yeah, so I bought the house originally for $950, and then I was able to auction it for $10,000, which the idea was to, build 10 houses at $1,000. And when I did that, there was a community that I was partnering with who already had land that they could use to build the tiny house community on. So things were looking like they were going to happen pretty quick. Then the land got pulled out from underneath them. So now they're still working on finding land. So the money is just sitting in an account waiting so that they have the land to be able to put the tiny houses on. So, and I just visited Opportunity Village in Eugene, Oregon, and they're doing some amazing stuff with tiny house communities for people that don't have homes up there. And they're starting another community up there. So it was really amazing to be there and to visit and see, what that could turn into. So I'm really looking forward to that progress happening.
One of the things that impressed me when I looked at your website is how transparent you are with the amount of money that you've earned and where that money has gone. Is it getting more difficult as you get more famous and you're asked to travel a lot more? Does it get harder and harder to live by your rules, or easier?
I would say harder in a way. I mean, most of it's not more challenging. The main challenge is flying. So I try to minimize flying as much as possible. Like just this morning, I got invited to speak in Morocco at a time when I'm already planning on being over in Europe for a speaking tour. So it kind of works, but it would require one more flight. And the thing is, I try to minimize my flying as much as possible. On my Europe tours, I take buses and trains, even on 12 to 20 hour trains that would only be a 1 or 2 hour flight, or a couple hour flight instead. So that's really the biggest challenge is I personally believe that the flying that I do is worth it for the change that it creates. But that's one of the challenges, is really picking the right ones that are worth it, because flying is one of the most environmentally destructive things that we do. It's easy to overlook, but so many people just completely overlook that, even though it's really massive. So that's really the big challenge. Everything else is easy though, because I'm really living the life that I want to be. Any fame or anything like that aside, I'm doing this because I want to be doing it for myself, for the world, for the community. And so, I don't want to have much money. at all, like period. There's no desire for it. So it's pretty easy for me to do because I'm only being myself.
You know, you're giving 100% of your media income to non-profits. So where, there are times when you're going to need money. If you're going to book a flight, you've got to pay for it, even if somebody else is going to give you that money back later. How do you cope? Where does any money that you do need to have come from?
So public speaking is where I make the money that I do personally have. So as far as like TV show and book, 100% of that's always donated directly to nonprofits. And then most of my public speaking is donated to nonprofits as well. This year, my personal income cap was $5,000. So once I had made that $5,000, everything else that comes in is donated directly to nonprofits. And the way that it works is I don't have the money come to me and then donate it. Instead, I just, like, for example, my TV show with Discovery Channel, I just wrote right into the contract, this money is donated directly to these nonprofits. And the same with my book. So I never am involved in the money at all, except for finding great places that can use the money well to affect positive social and environmental change. Now, I found that $5,000 was a little bit too little. It's like, I only have $1,000 left or something like that to get through the rest of the year, which means I have to live really frugally, which I want to, but I'm finding things a little tight at the end of the year. So I'll probably do more like 10,000 next year. And so, yeah, that little bit of money that I do make comes from public speaking.
You write about shaking off social norms, and this is probably one of the biggest blocks, that we have to contend with, to change our consciousness, because societal conditioning runs so deep. Where do we draw the line between doing what's right because it's right for us all and doing what's right because we've been brainwashed into thinking it's serving us all when it really isn't? A great example is paying taxes. A lot of people say, we must pay our taxes, but you have some really good answers in your book to ways that we can contribute to society without necessarily paying taxes. Will you share those with us?
Sure. And this is obviously a very controversial topic, the idea of not paying taxes, because it's just totally ingrained that is the guarantee, what you have to do to be not a mooch or a leech on society. But here's the problem. Most of the taxes go to destroying the world. It's between a quarter and a half of taxes in the United States go towards the military. So if you're fighting for peace and paying taxes, you're funding war. And Albert Einstein said something to the effect of, you can't possibly prepare for peace and war at the same time. And I completely agree with that. So how can I fund destruction of other people around the world and of the planet and be fighting for peace at the same time? I really can't. So that leaves me no choice but to not pay taxes. But what I can do is pay a heck of a lot more taxes than the average American does, but instead direct it towards things that are actually creating social and environmental justice around the world. So in 2015, for example, I've donated like 100%, I think, that year of everything that would have been paid to me went directly to nonprofits. It's like $40,000 or something like that. So basically, I paid 100% taxes that year directly to environmental and social nonprofits. It's obviously not taxes going to the government, but it's funding the projects that I feel like are really needed in the world right now. So it's a form of self-tax. And here's the other thing. So for example, the library is something that I truly support, and taxes go to that. So instead of money, I can volunteer at the library. I can have a shift where I volunteer, say, 8 hours a week or 5 hours a week. So I'm supporting them through my time and my energy, and that's as important as money. If we were to say take all of the time that we put into watching American football and put that into reshaping our country so that it's a sustainable and just place, boom, man, overnight we could have a massive transformation. So it's not just money, but it's also our time and our skills.
Absolutely. I mean, this is such a hard one for people to get their head around because, as I said, the conditioning runs so deep. But we really do have to change the way we think and start looking at all of the other things that we can do, which you lay out some great ideas in the book. Like if you use public parks, clean up some trash. If you use public bathrooms, leave them cleaner than you found them. There are many different ways that we can contribute other than paying taxes. And there's still a lot of debate around whether taxes are even legal in the first place.
Yeah, and one thing I do want to make clear is I'm not talking about tax evasion. I'm talking about what you could call voluntary simplicity. I don't make enough to owe taxes, so I'm not doing anything illegal, and nobody is after me because I don't owe taxes because I didn't make money to be taxed on. So that's a really important part of all of this. I'm not saying bring in $1 million a year and evade your taxes. I'm saying something extremely different from that.
Absolutely. Now, all of your extreme adventures and activism campaigns are meant to bring attention to these really important issues and inspire positive change. People have said to you that, that's a bit unattainable for the average person. But you offer a number of simple lessons and tips that can be adapted into any life. So can you share some of those tips with us?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and again, so I do extreme things, but the idea isn't that we have to run out and do extreme things. It's about getting us to think about what we can do in our own lives to make positive changes for ourselves, for the community, and the earth. So, some of those, really like some of the bigger ones, because, you can do, there's simple ones. You can take shorter showers, for example. You can ride your bike more and drive your car less. You can shop at the local farmers market instead of going to the big box corporate stores. Shop local, support local businesses, carrying your own reusable bag to the grocery store, ditching bottled water. That's a big one. So those are all really important ones that are kind of small, actually, because here's the thing. Some of the bigger ones, which I think is one of the things that the environmental movement doesn't talk about enough, some of the really big ones, eating a plant-based diet, eating much more fruits and vegetables is one of the single largest changes that we can make to reduce our environmental impact. And so I'm not personally vegan, but I'm 80 or 90% plant-based. I think anytime you do 80 or 90% of something, you're making a huge difference, which is another important thing is, people are often scared off by worrying they can't do enough, but something is enough. You got to start somewhere to get somewhere else. So I always say, great change doesn't happen overnight. It starts with one small change and then making another and another and another until you become the person that you want to be. And so with these things, you got to start where you are. You can't start where you're not. You have to start where you are. Start with the changes that you can, that are manageable, that are attainable, and then shoot for the bigger ones. And some of those really bigger ones are not owning a car is one of the biggest ones, eating a more plant-based diet, not flying, those, and then also having less kids. Those are 4 of the really big ones as far as really massively reducing our environmental impact.
And of course, there's an awful lot more on your website. You're listening to What is Going On. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, and my guest is author and environmental activist Rob Greenfield, whose extreme adventures and activism campaigns have made him a champion for all who have a passion to safeguard the Earth's resources and live in harmony with the planet. We'll be back after this break.
Bringing a more conscious lifestyle to your world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Spiritual, metaphysical, green living, psychic, alternative healing, life coaching. Do any of these or similar terms apply to your business or cause? If so, you are in a niche market with a very specific audience. Conscious Gate PR is the world's leading conscious public relations agency. With a global reach of over 4 million and growing, we offer comprehensive media campaigns to our targeted market. Learn more at ConsciousGatesPR.com. Conscious marketing for conscious minds.
Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living, a chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for, that new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
If you own a gun, you have a full-time responsibility. When you aren't using it, be sure it can't get into the hands of curious children, troubled teenagers, a thief, or anyone else who might misuse it. Your family, friends, and neighbors are all counting on you. Remember, always, lock it up. For more information on firearm storage safety, visit ncpc.org. This message brought to you by the National Crime Prevention Council, the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and the Ad Council.
Welcome back. Rob Greenfield, tell us about your new TEDx talk, Be the Change in a Messed Up World.
Yeah, so that's a talk that I did in Paris earlier this year in May. And, the thing is we live in a dire time, a time where any day you can have hundreds of environmental and social issues and bombard you. And it's a time where we can feel very overwhelmed with what's going on, just through your Facebook news feed, through turning on the TV, through all of that. It's I don't know how else to put it, but there's a lot of things going on. And so, but I still believe if any time is the right time to be the change that we want to see, to really stand up for what we believe, I think now is the time. And so the talk is really just, it's sharing my journey of waking up from a guy that wasn't paying attention to any of this, wasn't taking any actions for a better world, and changing to, someone who really cares about these things and is living it out loud. And so it's really just a talk that kind of shares that experience and talks about some of the lessons that I've learned, and hopes to really inspire people to just start making positive changes one little bit at a time.
I mean, clearly you are very passionate about what you do, and you've really dedicated your life to this. And you've done some extreme things yourself, including having a vasectomy, because you've said you don't want to have a child because you really want to be able to put all of your energy into this. As time goes on and your fame spreads and the work spreads, does that get harder? I mean, you mentioned that you have a girlfriend. Is she as passionate as you about this? Do you see at some point that you might want to live a slightly different life?
So I know my life will constantly be shifting. And the thing is, there's many ways to live out my beliefs. I don't have to be fully in the spotlight, because I think one of the most important things you can do is lead by example. And so I think one important thing is balance. Like, one of the things that I'm going to do in the long run, my plan is to start a sustainable living institute where I'll be, demonstrate, this is a place where you'll be able to learn all of this stuff, to learn, how to change your life to live a more environmentally friendly and socially just and less money-filled life, less, destructive life. And I'll be able to just live my life there, and people will be able to come learn. So in that way, my life will be different in the future. I probably will maybe travel a lot less, because traveling is pretty tiring. The point is that my life is always going to be shifting. I'm only 31 now. When I'm 60, things are going to be different. Now, by different, I don't mean I'm going to go back to the mainstream consumeristic way of life, but it is going to have to shift as my physical abilities, as my age, as these things change. But I will always, as long as I live, be living out my beliefs to a great extent. I'm very confident of that.
The world has changed rapidly in just, the few years since you took that first bike ride. the campaigns that you initiated, were quite startling to get people's attention. Nowadays, it's probably a lot easier to get people's attention, so you might not have to be so extreme in what you're doing. What do you have planned coming up, to continue spreading the word?
Yeah, you definitely have the right idea there. The idea for me was to do sort of really eye-catching things at the beginning, and once people were listening and I had more of a voice, then I wouldn't have to. Now, with that being said, I've also found that you can quickly, in a world that has just, today, I think it's one day we produce as much content as we had existence of human races until around the year of 2000. So every day we produce an unfathomable amount of content, which means you kind of have to stay relevant, otherwise you disappear into that. So I found yes, that is true, but at the same time, I do need to do things that still will have the media pick up on them. So one of my next adventures, my next projects is that for 1 year, I'm going to grow, forage, or hunt everything that I eat, down to harvesting my own salt from the ocean, my own herbs, growing everything, foraging and hunting. And so that's a project that I'm really looking forward to. So I won't spend a penny on food, no grocery stores, restaurants, anything of that sort. And really I'm just really excited to do it, both prove to myself that it's possible, but ultimately to inspire a lot of people to start growing more of their own food, not 100%, but starting to grow our own food and stop having a food system that's so based on fossil fuels.
Tell us about some of the non-profit organisations that 1% of the planet support and that you support.
Yeah, I actually have a list on my website, which I would recommend people check out. It's just robgreenfield.tv/nonprofits, and that's 50 nonprofits, I think, on there that I really, really like and support that cover different environmental issues. And some of the ones that I really like, Food is Free is an awesome project that basically is all about spreading that food is free, getting people that grow their own food and then share it for free in the community. Story of Stuff is a nonprofit that I love. They created the films, The Story of Stuff, The Story of Cosmetics, The Story of Electronics, all these really amazing films that teach you about where our stuff comes from and the impact it has on the earth. 1% for the Planet is a nonprofit that I'm an ambassador for, and they're a network. Basically, it's a network of businesses that commit to giving 1% of revenue to environmental nonprofits. So whether you make $1 million a year or $1,000 a year, you just commit to giving 1%. Recently, they just opened it up for people. People can give 1% of their revenue, their income, to environmental nonprofits. So if you make $100,000 a year, that would be $1,000 given to environmental nonprofits. If you just make $10,000 a year, it's $100. So it's something that's manageable for most people. Those are some of the nonprofits that I am really excited about.
And yeah, if people can't do anything else, they can at least donate to these nonprofits and support their work.
Yeah, and you could be donating your money if you are totally, no time, or it could be time. You could go and volunteer.
Looking back over the last number of years since you developed this awareness, how do you feel about yourself now and everything that you've accomplished?
Well, I think the thing that I'm the most proud about is existing in the 21st century as not a super hypocrite. Like, we're all hypocrites. No matter, if you care about the environment and you care about social issues, it's pretty much impossible to not have some level of hypocrisy. So I'm proud to have drastically reduced my level of hypocrisy while existing in 2017. Proud to be able to continue to go against the grain of American society, because that's what you got to do if you really care about justice and equality, is you have to be willing to go against injustice every day, which means you're going against the grain of society. So being able to stick to that and stand up, really those are the things that I am, the most proud of. which is something that we can all do, which is the other thing is trying to live a life that as many of us can have as possible, like trying to live a fair life is another thing that I feel proud of.
When I got to the end of your book, Dude, Making a Difference, you wrote about how one of your former girlfriends had written to you saying, I remember you being convinced you would be a millionaire someday. That was your life goal. And I really loved your response to that, which I'm not going to read, but I'd like you to share in your own words what that response was.
Well, I don't remember what the response in the book was. I haven't read the book in a couple of years, but I know today that, you know, I don't measure things in dollar value. I measure in the number of people that have made positive changes, my positive impact on the world. Maybe the number of people that are now riding bikes, or the number of people that are growing their own food. You know, basically, I measure my success in clean air and fresh water. Like, these are the things that I can measure my success in. It's not money anymore. So I am probably a billionaire if you measured things that are far more important than money. But as far as money goes, I have like $1,000 to my name. So, you know, I would be considered, I guess you would call me poor. But in experience and love and relationships and purpose and passion, I'm about as full as I could be.
Well, one of the most important points you made was you wanted to be a millionaire because you thought that spelled freedom. But now, the knowledge that you have now, knowledge and simplicity, has given you the ability to live more freely than you ever could have imagined in your younger years.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I found the opposite. I found that people who are really rich are the least free. I mean, I've been traveling. I've traveled to 45 countries and 49 states in the United States. And I've just basically found time and time again that money does not equal freedom. Yes, you need a certain amount. You need to be able to pay rent and, you know, have money for food and education. But what I found is that there's kind of a threshold. And when you get too far above that, then you lose your freedom, because then it's chasing your possessions, fixing your possessions, insuring your possessions, and all that. So me, with no question, I have become so much more free in living more simply and with vastly less money.
Rob Greenfield, thank you so much for joining us today. If you'd like a copy of Dude, Making a Difference, Rob encourages you to look at your local store rather than Amazon. If you can't find it there, carry it or buy direct in society publishers. Because let's face it, Amazon doesn't really need your money. You and the planet don't need it. Keep up with Rob's adventures at robgreenfield.com via Facebook. I'm Sandy Sophia. Thanks for joining me today. Having your